At first glance, Sarah and Adam were the perfect couple. They were both well known in their high school, admired by teachers and peers alike. Sarah, a quiet and intelligent student, was always top of her class. She had a kind, reserved nature, often lost in her books and dreams. Adam, on the other hand, was the exact opposite. He was loud, confident, and loved being the center of attention. A star athlete, he had a charming smile and a reputation for being the life of the party. The two seemed like an unlikely match, yet somehow they fit perfectly. Adam was drawn to Sarah's beauty and intelligence, while Sarah was captivated by Adam's charm and outgoing personality. At first, their relationship seemed like any other typical high school romance. They went to movies, hung out at school events, and posted pictures of each other on social media, showcasing their seemingly perfect relationship. Sarah would beam in every photo with Adam by her side, and Adam would always find a way to make her laugh. Their friends admired them, and everyone around them envied their relationship. They were the couple that everyone assumed would last forever. But beneath the surface, things weren't as perfect as they appeared. Adam's personality was more complex than anyone realized. On the outside, he came across as confident and carefree, but underneath, there was something darker. He was driven by a need for control, an unrelenting desire to be admired and adored. His charm was a carefully constructed mask, designed to hide a growing narcissistic streak that only those closest to him would see. Adam didn't just want Sarah, he wanted her to be his, completely and unconditionally. And as time passed, his possessiveness began to take a more noticeable form. Sarah, who once enjoyed her independence, began to feel the weight of Adam's expectations. It started off subtly at first. Small comments about her clothes, about who she was talking to, about what she was doing. He would make jokes about her spending time with other friends, but over time, those jokes turned into demands. Sarah felt uncomfortable but didn't know how to address it. She had always been the peacemaker, the one who avoided conflict, and so she just kept quiet, believing that maybe she was overreacting. After all, Adam loved her, didn't he? As Adam's jealousy grew, so did his need for control. He started showing up at places where Sarah would be, even when they weren't supposed to meet. He'd text her constantly, asking where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing. Sarah found herself starting to withdraw from her friends and activities. Her world started to revolve more and more around Adam, and she found herself tiptoeing around him, trying to avoid triggering his temper. It was as though the relationship had shifted from one of mutual love to one of fear and submission, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what had changed. Her friends began to notice the subtle shift. Sarah seemed quieter, more anxious. She wasn't the same girl who had once been confident and full of life. She'd become withdrawn, often distracted, and Adam's presence seemed to drain the energy from her. At first, they chalked it up to school stress, but soon they realized something deeper was at play. Sarah wasn't just stressed. She was scared. But scared of what? She wouldn't talk about it, and no one could quite figure out what was wrong. Her friends urged her to stand up for herself, but Sarah would brush them off, reassuring them that things were fine. The truth, however, was far darker than anyone could have imagined. Adam's obsession with Sarah was escalating, but Sarah, unable to see the true danger, continued to believe that it was just part of their relationship. She had fallen too deep into his web of manipulation, not realizing that Adam's need for control would soon spiral into something far more dangerous. The signs were all there, but Sarah was too caught in the illusion of love to see them. As the weeks went by, Adam's behavior became more erratic. and Sarah found herself trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape. The subtle hints of control had escalated into full-blown manipulation. Adam's jealousy was no longer just a few harmless comments. It was an all-consuming force that dictated every aspect of her life. He would call her multiple times a day, often checking on her whereabouts. At first, Sarah thought it was just a sign of his love and care. But soon, it felt like an imposition. Every time she spoke to a friend, Adam would get upset, accusing her of not prioritizing him. Every moment she spent away from him became a reason for conflict. He would find ways to make her feel guilty for not giving him her full attention, twisting every situation to paint her as the one who was neglecting their relationship. Her friends, who had once admired their bond, began to grow concerned. They saw the changes in Sarah, the way she now seemed to walk on eggshells around Adam. Sarah, once lively and independent, had become quiet and anxious. She stopped making plans with them outside of school, always offering excuses as to why she couldn't hang out. At first, they accepted it, assuming she was just busy. But then, the cracks in her relationship with Adam began to show more clearly. It wasn't just the jealousy. It was the way Adam made her feel like she couldn't do anything right. If she wore a dress he didn't like, he would criticize her appearance. If she spoke to a male classmate, he would accuse her of flirting. Every time she tried to assert her own opinion, he would dismiss her, convincing her that she was being unreasonable. Sarah had started to believe that perhaps she was overreacting, that maybe she was the one who was being selfish for wanting any space at all. What hurt Sarah the most was the way Adam would alternate between adoration and cruelty. One moment, he would shower her with compliments, telling her how lucky he was to have someone as perfect as her. He would make grand gestures, bringing her flowers or writing her love notes, only to turn cold at the slightest sign of her trying to be independent. He would give her the silent treatment for days, leaving her to wonder what she had done wrong. She would apologize, even when she hadn't done anything, hoping to make things right. But no matter how much she tried to please him, it was never enough. Adam's love was conditional, based on his own needs and desires. His affection was a tool used to manipulate and control her into submission. It was during one of these periods of tension that Sarah began to feel isolated. The weight of Adam's possessiveness made her withdraw from her family and friends. She stopped confiding in them, afraid that they would judge her for staying with someone who clearly didn't respect her. She kept her struggles to herself, afraid that if she spoke out, it would only make things worse. It wasn't until a confrontation between Sarah and Adam that she realized how much danger she was really in. It was a minor disagreement, something as trivial as Sarah talking to a new student in class. But it sent Adam into a fury. He accused her of betraying him, of not valuing their relationship. That was when Sarah saw the change in him, the anger, the rage in his eyes. He was no longer the charming, affectionate boyfriend she had fallen in love with. He had become someone else, someone terrifying. And for the first time, Sarah felt afraid. She wanted to leave, but every time she thought about it, Adam would cry, apologize, and promise to change. Each time she would believe him, thinking that this time it would be different. She clung to the hope that the boy she had once loved would return, the one who made her feel special and cherished. But deep down, Sarah knew that the person she loved was no longer there. Adam's true nature had surfaced, and it was darker than she could have ever imagined. But Sarah was too caught in the emotional web Adam had woven to escape. She didn't know how to break free. The more she tried to pull away, the more Adam's control tightened, and she felt herself slipping deeper into a relationship that was no longer safe. The day of the tragedy arrived without any warning. But, in hindsight, the signs had been there all along. It was a Thursday afternoon, and Sarah had just finished her last class for the day. She was exhausted, mentally drained from trying to balance school and her increasingly strained relationship with Adam. They had fought that morning over something small. Sarah had made plans to study with a classmate, something Adam had disapproved of. He had insisted that she cancel, but Sarah, feeling the weight of his constant demands, stood firm for once. She told him she needed time to focus on her studies. Adam didn't take kindly to this. His rage simmered beneath the surface, and Sarah could feel it, though he didn't show it at first. He smiled when they parted ways after class, as if nothing was wrong. But as Sarah walked down the hall toward the restroom, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She wasn't sure why, but a knot had formed in her stomach. Her mind wandered back to the argument they had earlier, replaying every word, every look. She tried to push it aside, telling herself that everything was fine, that maybe she was just overthinking. But as she entered the school bathroom, she noticed something strange. The door to the bathroom was slightly ajar, as though someone had just entered. Sarah hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should turn around and leave, but the need to freshen up and clear her mind was too strong. She pushed the door open further and stepped inside. What she didn't know was that Adam had been following her. After their argument, he had stormed out of the school's main building, his anger growing with each step. He had gone straight to the bathroom, knowing Sarah would come there to collect herself. He was furious that she had defied him, that she had dared to make plans without him. His jealousy and possessiveness had reached a boiling point, and he couldn't bear the thought of her spending time with anyone but him. When Sarah entered the bathroom, she was momentarily distracted by the sound of water running from one of the sinks. She assumed someone else was in there, but she didn't see anyone. Her attention was drawn to the mirror in front of her as she reached for her purse, trying to calm her nerves. That's when she heard the door creak behind her. Before she could turn around, Adam grabbed her from behind. He was fast and she didn't have time to react. His grip was tight, almost suffocating. Sarah tried to break free, but Adam's strength was overwhelming. His anger had consumed him entirely, and his need to control her had turned into a dangerous, violent obsession. He shoved her into one of the bathroom stalls, the force of the impact knocking the breath out of her. Sarah struggled, her heart pounding in her chest as she realized the true extent of Adam's rage. He wasn't just angry, he was capable of something much worse. The bathroom, once a place of comfort and solitude, became a prison. Adam's cold eyes locked onto Sarah's, his expression a twisted mixture of fury and contempt. Sarah pleaded with him, but Adam couldn't hear her anymore. His mind was clouded with jealousy and the overwhelming need to punish her for defying him. He didn't want to hurt her, at least not consciously. But in that moment, his obsession with controlling her was all that mattered. He didn't care about the consequences, only that she would learn to never disrespect him again. In the chaos that followed, Sarah fought for her life. She scratched, kicked, and screamed, but Adam's grip only tightened. Her movements grew weaker as she struggled to breathe, the sound of the water running in the background eerily loud against the silence that had fallen between them. It was a fight she couldn't win. Afterward, the scene was nothing short of horrific. Sarah's body lay lifeless on the cold bathroom floor, blood pooling around her, staining the tiles. The water from the sink had overflowed, mixing with the blood, creating a sickening sight. Adam, his breathing ragged and wild, stood over her, staring at the result of his actions with a cold, almost detached expression. He had done what he set out to do, and in his mind, he had made her pay for what she had done, for challenging his control. He didn't know what to do next. Panic started to set in, but he quickly tried to regain his composure. He turned on the sink, flooding the bathroom floor in an attempt to wash away the evidence of his crime. The water mixed with Sarah's blood, creating a surreal, haunting image of a bathroom soaked in both liquid and loss. It was as though Adam had tried to erase what he had just done, but deep down, he knew he couldn't escape the consequences. By the time anyone would find Sarah's body, the scene had already been altered. Adam had left the bathroom, walking away as though nothing had happened. But in the quiet aftermath of the tragedy, the question loomed. How did things escalate so quickly? And why did Adam's obsession take such a deadly turn? The investigation into Sarah's death began almost immediately after her body was discovered. But at first, things didn't seem to add up. The school's security footage showed Sarah entering the bathroom, but there was no footage of anyone else entering with her. It was a disturbing puzzle, as no one had seen Adam enter, and no one had heard any sounds of a struggle. The scene itself seemed almost surreal. Sarah's body, so tragically still, and the water running from the sink, creating a disturbing scene of chaos and confusion. It wasn't just the brutality of the murder that was shocking. It was how calculated the whole scene appeared to be. Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator, took charge of the case. From the beginning, he had a gut feeling that something was wrong. Adam, who had immediately stepped into the role of the grieving boyfriend, seemed almost too calm, too composed. He showed up at the school within hours of the police arriving, offering his condolences and claiming to be devastated by the loss. His story was clear and rehearsed. He hadn't seen Sarah since their argument earlier that day, and he had left school early to meet friends. He had no alibi, but there was nothing concrete to prove that he had been involved in Sarah's death. For a while, it seemed like it might have been just a tragic accident, a case of something gone terribly wrong in a moment of heated emotion. But Detective Miller couldn't shake the feeling that Adam wasn't telling the whole truth. There was something too perfect about his demeanor. Too many well-timed answers, too little emotion. And then there was the strange detail about the bathroom itself. The water, the way it had flooded the floor. Why would someone do that, unless they were trying to cover something up? It was an odd and instinctive move, one that suggested guilt. The breakthrough came when the police started digging deeper into Adam's background. They found that his relationships with other people, especially his previous girlfriends, had been far from perfect. There were reports of jealousy, manipulation, and control. Adam had been known to act possessive and obsessive in the past, often making his partners feel guilty for spending time with anyone but him. In some of these relationships, things had ended bitterly, but no one had ever taken it far enough to consider that it could lead to violence. It wasn't long before a friend of Sarah's came forward with a disturbing revelation. She mentioned that Sarah had confided in her just a few weeks before her death. Sarah had been distant, withdrawn, and seemed to be constantly walking on eggshells around Adam. The friend recalled that Sarah had expressed concern about Adam's behavior, though she hadn't gone into specifics. She had been afraid of what might happen if she tried to break up with him. "He can be scary," Sarah had whispered, though she had never elaborated on what she meant. The friend hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now, hearing about Sarah's tragic fate, it sent a chill down her spine. Meanwhile, Adam continued to play the role of the devastated boyfriend. He spoke to the press, showed up at memorials, and shed tears for Sarah. But his actions raised more suspicions as time passed. His stories about his whereabouts that day became more inconsistent. At first, he claimed to have left school early, to meet friends. But the school's security cameras didn't show him leaving. He had been unaccounted for during the time of Sarah's murder. His calm demeanor, coupled with the inconsistencies in his story, made Detective Miller more convinced that Adam had something to hide. The turning point came when Adam's phone was finally examined. Investigators found a series of encrypted messages between Adam and Sarah that had never been seen before. The texts revealed a growing tension between the two, with Adam's jealousy becoming increasingly apparent. He had sent Sarah numerous messages demanding her attention, accusing her of flirting with other guys and belittling her for spending time with her friends. The messages were full of anger and resentment, showing just how deeply Adam's need for control had affected their relationship. Most chilling of all, however, were the messages Adam had sent just hours before Sarah's death. The last one, sent minutes before she entered the bathroom, was a final attempt at exerting control over her. It was simple, but menacing. "I'm watching you." The message sent a shiver down Detective Miller's spine. Adam had been tracking her movements, and he had followed her into the bathroom where the deadly confrontation occurred. As the evidence piled up, the pieces of the puzzle finally began to fit. The water in the bathroom, the bloody scene, the cryptic text messages, they all pointed to the same conclusion. Adam had been planning this for some time. His narcissistic obsession with controlling Sarah had pushed him over the edge, and he had seen no other way to assert his dominance over her. He had gone to the bathroom, waited for her, and then taken her life in a fit of rage. But even after committing the unthinkable, Adam still believed he could cover his tracks, fool the investigators, and escape the consequences of his actions. But the more the investigators uncovered, the clearer it became that Adam's need for control had led to his downfall. His carefully constructed web of lies was beginning to unravel, and the truth was finally coming to light. As the investigation into Sarah's death reached its climax, the walls slowly closed in on Adam. Detective Miller had gathered enough evidence to arrest him, but the question still lingered. Why? What had pushed Adam to take Sarah's life in such a brutal and senseless manner? In the days leading up to the arrest, Adam's behavior became more erratic. He was no longer the composed, grieving boyfriend he had tried so hard to portray. His outward calmness had cracked, revealing the desperation and panic underneath. The arrest came swiftly. Adam, who had spent the days following Sarah's death trying to maintain the facade of innocence, was taken into custody without resistance. His cold demeanor remained intact as the handcuffs were placed on his wrists, but the reality of his situation was starting to sink in. The detective's questions were relentless, and Adam's carefully constructed lies began to unravel with each passing minute. The phone records, the encrypted messages, the inconsistencies. In his alibi, it all pointed to one irrefutable truth. Adam had murdered Sarah in a fit of rage over his obsessive need for control. As the days wore on, Adam's defense team tried to spin a different narrative. They argued that Adam had been overwhelmed by emotions, that he had never intended for things to escalate the way they did. But the evidence told a different story. Sarah had been the victim of months of emotional manipulation, and Adam's narcissistic need to dominate had driven him to the point of violence. His obsession had become so all-consuming that he saw no other way to maintain control over her than through force. The argument that it had been a crime of passion fell apart under the weight of the facts. During the trial, Sarah's friends and family were left to grapple with the horror of what had happened. Sarah's parents, once proud of the bright future their daughter had ahead of her, now found themselves in a world of unimaginable grief. Her mother had always adored the idea of Sarah having a steady relationship, but she never imagined it could have led to something so destructive. They spoke tearfully about Sarah's kind and compassionate nature, remembering the girl who loved to help others, who was always there for her friends. They had no idea that the charming boyfriend they had once welcomed into their home was capable of such violence. The impact of the trial was felt deeply by Sarah's friends, who had witnessed the gradual decline of Sarah's well-being in the months leading up to her death. They were haunted by the fact that they had seen the warning signs: Sarah's withdrawal, her anxiety, her fear of Adam, but had never fully understood the depth of the danger she was in. They regretted not doing more, not pushing harder, to get Sarah to open up, to see the red flags for what they truly were. In their hearts, they knew they had failed to protect her when she needed them the most. Adam's trial was a spectacle, with the prosecution detailing his obsessive behavior and manipulative tactics in chilling detail. They painted a picture of a young man who had used charm and affection to lure Sarah in, only to turn controlling and abusive once he had her under his thumb. His manipulation had slowly isolated her from her friends and family, turning her into a shell of the person she had once been. The most damning piece of evidence was the message he had sent just moments before Sarah entered the bathroom. "I'm watching you." It was the final nail in the coffin, showing that Adam had been stalking her, keeping tabs on her every move. As the verdict was read, guilty of first-degree murder, there was no sense of victory. Sarah's family, while relieved that justice had been served, could never fully recover from the loss of their daughter. The community, too, was left shaken. The story of Sarah's tragic end became a cautionary tale, one that echoed in the halls of the high school and beyond. It was a reminder of the dangers of unchecked jealousy, of the dark side of relationships that appeared perfect on the surface, but were built on control and manipulation. In the aftermath, the impact of Sarah's death rippled through the lives of those who knew her, her friends, her family, the school. They all had to live with the knowledge that someone they had once trusted, someone who seemed so normal, had taken a life in the most horrific way imaginable. And for Adam, there was no redemption, no second chance. His actions had irrevocably shattered not only Sarah's life, but his own as well. The story of Sarah's tragic end was now a part of his legacy, a dark and haunting reminder of the consequences of narcissism and control.